Texas Lutheran University.
Welcome to our panel session. Glad that you're all here for this period of time. Today we have starting closest to me, Dr. Ed Vessel, who you just heard speak. Dave Mairs, who spoke earlier today. TLU alumnus, Nathan Fry. And current TLU students, Andrea Moreno and Christina Nutting, who are President and Vice President of Service Through Music. All right, so I have a few questions for the panel, and then we can open up questions to the larger audience. Students, remember that if you need credit for attending the session but have not yet done so, you can do so at the end of the session, at the back of the room. So first, I've asked each member of the panel to briefly introduce themselves and give us a sense of who they are and what they do. Starting with Dr. Ed Vessel. Ed.
So, a number of you, I'm sure, have a good sense of what I do after listening to me talk for almost an hour. I'm a research scientist at the Max Planck Institute for Empirical Aesthetics in Frankfurt, Germany, and I'm interested in understanding what happens in the brain when people are moved by artwork or by other forms of aesthetic inquiry like music or dance.
Thank you. Next we have Dave Mairs.
Hi, I'm Dave Mairs, and I serve as a music director for the Mid-Texas Symphony, which is a fully professional orchestra based here in Seguin and in New Braunfels. We are not in the Guinness Book of Records, but we should be. Seguin and New Braunfels are the two smallest communities in the United States that have a fully professional orchestra. So I get to work with them. And I think my slant is that in addition to serving there, I spent a number of years as an orchestral musician and also as a music educator.
Thank you. TLU alumnus Nathan Fry.
Hi, it's good to be back here. I'm a graduate student currently at Colorado State University. I'm studying music therapy with a specific concentration in neurologic music therapy. That's the focus and approach that we take at that school. With the idea that we use neurological mechanisms and understandings and how that informs our clinical practice as opposed to either a behavioral analytical approach. And right now I'm working on my thesis and comparing traditional talk support group therapy and music group therapy to see how that can improve addiction treatment.
President of Service Through Music, Andrea Moreno.
Hi, my name is Andrea Moreno. I'm a senior music education major with a minor in Spanish. I serve as president for Service Through Music and Mariachi Oro y Negro, VP of membership for Kappa Kappa Psi, and I'm in band, orchestra, and women's choir, also a TLU admissions ambassador, and I feel very passionate about the power of music, so I'm very involved in music all around campus.
Vice President of Service Through Music, Christina Nutting.
I'm a senior elementary education major. At TLU, I'm in the honors program, Xi Tau sorority, president of Greek Council, TLU Women's Choir, also an admissions ambassador, and the vice president of Service Through Music. I'm very, very passionate about incorporating music into the traditional classroom.
All right, well, thank you. This first question goes to Dr. Ed Vessel. Ed, you're relatively new in a relatively new discipline called Empirical Neuroaesthetics. What exciting major new discoveries do you think are immediately on the horizon, and what do you think are potential longer range contributions of the field more generally?
So I won't rehash a lot of what I spoke about just a moment ago, but in general I think that there are a few domains of inquiry that we're just figuring out how to tackle. So I presented to you a lot of work about artwork. You heard from Dan Levitin about the extensive work on music. But there are developing fields of study to figure out what happens in the brain when you are observing dance, or when you are looking at architecture, or when you're reading poetry. And some of these present particular challenges. So for example, going with your friends to watch a performance in a theater is fundamentally an interactive thing, right? It's very hard to be strongly moved by a dance performance if you're watching it on a small screen that might be quite different from actually being part of an audience. And in order for us to understand that as neuroscientists, we need to develop technologies that allow us to understand what's happening in the brain out there in the world and not just in a tube in the lab. So I think that one of the advances we're going to see over the next few years is an advance in technology that allows us to get out there and study what's happening when someone is walking through a museum or when someone is part of an audience in a dance performance. And so we can start to understand what happens when you're part of an audience, when you're with your friend, when you're watching something that is moving and changing and you're not just staring at a computer. Another area I think that is really evolving is trying to answer the why question. Why is it that we have this capacity to be strongly moved by artwork? And in my talk, I gave what I think are maybe a few hints for it, which is that this capacity is really built upon this system in our brain that gives us pleasure for understanding the world, for acquiring new information. And I think this is only one piece. I think it's also the case that we are understanding more and more about the role that artistic phenomena play in communication and in social communication. So I think that, we can't necessarily play the game of, as scientists, trying to figure out what evolution was doing or what led to a particular faculty that we have in our brain. But I do think that we can start to dig deeper and try to understand what these functions play in other parts of our life, and that may tell us more about why we can be so emotionally moved by certain things. And then I guess the last thing I'll mention is looking forward. I think there's a strong link, hopefully it's very clear, I think that aesthetic experience is strongly linked to learning. And so I think that we can start to use some of this research to influence the classroom, that we can try to make the case that aesthetic experiences with art and music really help people learn better. If you can get people to enjoy what they're learning, they're going to be so much more intrinsically engaged, and that the arts are a really great way to do that. And there's, even at a more broad level, a strong relationship between aesthetic experiences and health. So that we can make our environments where we work or where we play places where we want to be, where we want to spend more time and where we can be more productive. And we, I think, can also help people who have various forms of depression or people who in general are perhaps in a hospital or recovering from something. We can make that process of recovery better and perhaps help people by incorporating what we're learning about what's going on in the brain when you're looking at artwork or listening to music.
Great, thank you. Next question is for Dave Mairs. Dave, you've been a long-term educator and music professional, contributing to both facilitating aesthetic experience of thousands of people through your music, as well as helping students and audiences understand the value and power of music. If you had to characterize several key points about music generally, perhaps ones that you did not get a chance to share earlier today, what would you want this audience to walk away with today? What key points would you share?
Well, as I look out over the audience and I see new faces, we're glad to have you here. I think that I would want to be an evangelist. Can I use that word without everybody going, whoa? I would want to be an evangelist for the whole idea of that process is so important. You have this powerful thing called music, and we have great research to show that more and more. For instance, back in the Stone Age when I was in high school, the common concept amongst teachers, my mother and father were both teachers, and it was, well, all the best kids are in the band, orchestra, and choir. That was just the way they thought. This is back in the 50s, all right? That's the way they thought. But we know even from, in general, even from someone like myself who hasn't done the research, we know from people that are doing research of various kinds that now it's not the smartest kids that are in the band, orchestra, and choir. It's the fact that they're in the band, orchestra, and choir and dealing with music. And I can only do music because that's what I do. But the study of that, the performance of that, and maybe now other factors, really makes kids smarter. Or let's say in the sense that they learn better, they score higher on tests, and who isn't most interested in tests, including parents, right, and as well as administrators. So we have a different, I think we have a better understanding. And I think I would want to re-emphasize what I tried to do a little earlier this morning, is the fact that those of us who are involved, whether it be for me as a conductor of a professional orchestra, or for some of you who will be or already are working and educators and teaching music to your orchestra or band or choir or kids, that the process is really key to helping, as Ed just said, I think, creating that environment that you mentioned. You said it better, but creating that positive environment where the child, whether it be an 8-year-old child or a 52-year-old child playing the violin who happens to be, a professional artist, where that environment that allows them to perform their very, very best. And we talked a little, and I think the other thing is, we get stuck sometimes in our society between, okay, so is it good enough? Those of you, how many are in band, orchestra, choir here? Yeah, okay. So did you, if I say from your high school experience, did you ever have that experience of somebody that came out, or you didn't, and you went, we got a 1? Do you know what I mean? Are you with me? Or we got a 2. That whole measurement thing, especially in Texas. But this is not the only place where that UIL, that rating system, that judging can get in the way. And so you have technical ability, but you have what's this musicality thing. And sometimes the constraints on us can make it very, very difficult to develop the whole perspective and a healthy perspective in music. And I think, but even I'm still convinced that the process, how we go about teaching, how we go about guiding and bringing out the best in every person that we meet, is key to allowing us to create a better ensemble. Because I deal with ensembles, with groups. How do you help so that they are able to give their best performance, whether it's 5th grade choir or a professional orchestra, and maybe even as a bonus to finish the performance of whatever it is and just kind of look around and feel that what just happened, that sense. Dan talked about goosebumps, whatever that is, I hope I get a chance. I can't wait to get a chance to hear you play the piano, in this jazz piano, all-state jazz piano dude over here. He's able to with his, wow, that had the groove. So there are a lot of things that Dan talked about last night that I think our process really can help and aid in that.
Thank you. I'm also looking forward to that. Nathan's going to be playing a musical piece for us immediately following this panel, so definitely stick around for that. And Dr. Eliza Jeffords and Dr. Dowd as well, so please stick around for that right after this panel. Just take us a moment to get that set up. So Nathan, as you noted in your introduction, you're studying music therapy at Colorado State University. So if you could just tell us a little bit about your perspective about music therapy and how it is applied in clinical settings.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would define music therapy as the use of musical elements administered by a trained clinician to clients to work on individualized goals and needs. Musical elements that could be anything as simple as using rhythm, timbre, or meter, or something more complex in talking about using improvisation versus composition in a musical technique. So at CSU, we specifically study neurologic music therapy. We have, I think, 25 techniques that we have codified, and not all of them, I would say, are really evidence-based. We have quite a few that have emerging evidence that's coming out right now, and one in particular, and I'll talk about this more in detail, one that I would say is the most evidence-based technique we have. It's called Rhythmic Auditory Stimulation. And this one uses in one of the more simpler or basic elements of music as rhythm, functions as a therapeutic mechanism in this. And so it's used it's used strictly for gait rehabilitation, and it works well with stroke patients and patients who have Parkinson's. We understand the neural mechanisms of it more so in terms of Parkinson's. So we have these deep structures in the brain, collectively called the basal nuclei. And in Parkinson's disease, a portion of this that's damaged is a portion that's responsible for releasing dopamine. Now, dopamine is usually associated with our reward and pleasure centers in our brain, but it's also responsible in helping with movement facilitation. And so when this area is disturbed, this is where you get the resting tremor in Parkinson's and the shuffled gait and the freezing. What we found is that so what these basal nuclei do is they essentially provide an internal cue for the timing of movements. And so what we found is that by providing a steady, rhythmic external cue, this helps to supplement for the lack of the internal cue, and it provides facilitation for the movement. We've seen this also evidenced in that the auditory cortex and the primary motor cortex in the brain share nerve bundle fibers as they're descending. And so the idea is that these shared networks are using the principles of neuroplasticity. We have this external cue in the auditory cortex that's helping to prime the motor cortex, and it's bypassing the damage. And sometimes it's a scene if you just, you can put in a Bluetooth device and have a metronome, and the effects are almost instantaneous. The freezing stops, the shuffled gait becomes more of a steady walk. And it can be used as such, so we're using it in real time to work on, or to help with the Parkinsonian symptoms. You can also use it to help with training of gait rehabilitation. So the way this would work is you would assess the cadence of the patient and see how that compares to a typical cadence you might see in their age range of their population. And work on modulating their cadence toward that more typical range we might see. Doing this by using a 5 to 10% modulation increases or decreases depending on if it's a swifter or a slowed gait. And the reason we use 5 to 10% is because we can't actually perceive tempo differences any less than 5%. About 4% is about the maximum of where we can't tell that there's a difference. And so it has to be consciously perceptible to the individual, because that's how it helps us to entrain to that rhythmic pulse. And we also find that, it's not necessarily, they don't have to walk in time with the beat, because we found through research that we actually entrain to the periods of music as opposed to the pulse itself. So they can entrain to the offbeat in a sense as well. Now this type of timing and firing of neural mechanisms and neuroplasticity also helps to inform other aspects. Another technique we have is called pattern sensory enhancement. It's used a lot in physical rehabilitation. In fact, actually, I think it works best if you have a physical therapist there helping to provide facilitation for these movements. But essentially, we use different types of cueing mechanisms, spatial cueing, force cueing, and timing to help with facilitation of movements. So, time cueing in the sense of, if you're having this type of exercise, it would be much different than if you're doing arm reaches to the side. You might use a different meter depending on what type of exercise you're working on. And the force cueing helps to initiate that movement as it's working on it. And having motivating music depending on the age range of the group you're working with to help with reducing pain and reducing, allowing them to be able to do more reps, and so it increases that exercise. So you can have aspects of music therapy such as that, where music is functioning as the therapeutic mechanism itself, where you can have music therapy where it's the music is working as part of the therapeutic group as a whole. So say, you're working on a group of emotional support, individuals with depression, bipolar disorder, anxiety, and I could just simply start with, let's just play in a drum circle and play how you feel today. And then I can listen to the group and see what's coming out. If someone's playing agitated or if someone's not playing at all, that's already giving me information through the music process to where they can convey how they're feeling in a safe environment where it doesn't have to be verbal, they don't have to say it, because music is a much more unified way of us to converse with each other, and it feels safer in that group setting. So there's aspects of that where it can also function more as a part of a therapeutic mechanism, not as where it's doing the work itself, but it's helping to facilitate the work. So
It's fascinating. Now, how long you been gone?
2
Seems
years.
like you've learned an awful lot. Since it's fascinating stuff. Also, I think it leads nicely into the next question for both Andrea and Christina. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about the Service Through Music program and maybe some specific examples of where you've seen the power kind of at work. So if you could share that with the audience.
So for those of you that don't know, Service to Music is an organization that actually applies all of this research that we have been listening to since last night with Dan as well. So we work with the Music and Memory program, and we go to nursing homes, Guadalupe Nursing Home here in Seguin, and then right across the street, Windsor Nursing Home. We have certified Guadalupe way before our time. The STM chapter here at Texas Lutheran University was actually the first one to certify a nursing home through the Music and Memory program in the state of Texas. So it's a lot of really great stuff going on, and now we're working on certifying Windsor Nursing Home, and that means that we can go in and personalized playlists for these residents that have Alzheimer's and dementia. And so obviously with all the research that has been done, the connections that they make to this music, and specific music from their culture, as we heard last night, helps them instead of medicine, or it calms them down. So it's really amazing that they've been talking about the power of music, and even for band, orchestra, and choir when we're in middle school, or even younger than that, and we start singing or learning how to play violin or a band instrument. It's absolutely amazing what that does for all of us at all different ages. And so we have specifically worked with these residents in these nursing homes, specifically with Alzheimer's and dementia. So what we do is we go and sing. And last Saturday we actually went to go sing, and we also played a couple things for them. But I'll talk about an experience that kind of stuck with me whenever we were working with them last year. I work with the activities directors to set this stuff up, and she was very thankful that we do this for their residents, because she had a resident that could not calm down and was yelling, and there's legally things that the nurses cannot do, like touch them or grab them by the arms, or even they can't force them to take a shower, and sometimes they won't do that because they can't remember. But she went across the street to go grab an iPod and put music on for this resident. Immediately she had calmed down, and they were able to control her, and it was just amazing to see that. And to experience that, and to know that we are a part of that, and that everyone can be a part of that. And most importantly, I think we try to spread this message of the power of music and what it can do, because you never know who has a family member or friend that is living with that. So, we're here to let you know this is what music can do for these people. And so that was a really, really great experience that I had. It's really amazing to know that we can go out and do that kind of stuff. And so I know Christina has other experiences to talk about.
Another experience we had was actually this past Saturday. We brought some of our members to sing and perform instrumental pieces at Guadalupe Nursing Home and then Windsor Nursing Home. So we had our members do like solo pieces and duet pieces, and then at the end, all of us together sang Amazing Grace, and everyone knows Amazing Grace, or they at least know the melody. So we always encourage people to sing along with us. So all the residents were out there and were like, if you know the song, which you probably do, you should sing along with us. So a few of the people were like going at it. They were singing, like having a great time. And then we finished, and afterwards we went up to the members of the nursing home, and we were like, hey, like, thanks so much, for letting us come here and singing. And this one lady was like, yeah, I love Amazing Grace. And we were like, yeah, I mean, like, you were singing, like, you were, like, killing it. And she was like, I was singing? And we're like, yeah, like, you were singing, like, really loudly. Like, she didn't even realize that she was singing. So music is really, really cool that you don't, like, if you have Alzheimer's or dementia, you forget things that you're doing, you forget how to do things, and she didn't even think about it. She just automatically started singing Amazing Grace because she knew it from way back when. Music is so powerful, and that's why we're so passionate about it, that it can be implemented in so many different aspects of our lives.
All right, well, thank you. So now I want to come back to Dr. Ed Bessel and maybe see, either based on some of the comments that were being made by panel members, or just further observations that you've had that have been sparked by some of this conversation, any additional things you'd like to share with us right now?
Sure. There are a few things that really struck me about what each of you said. I think it's very clear from, I'm sure, your own experience as well, what's been mentioned here is how deeply personal aesthetic experiences can be. And in our work, we found this interesting finding that there's a brain network that is very oriented towards intrinsic, internally self-referential thought. And typically this network is not involved when you are perceiving the world around you, when you're trying to make sense of the world around you. And we find that whereas these two networks typically are operating in antiphase, where one's up or the other's up, you're either paying attention to the world or you're paying attention only internally, we find that aesthetic experiences lead to a situation where both networks are simultaneously active. And so we think that a hallmark of aesthetic experience is the idea that you are both paying attention to and processing the external world, and also involving and using the internally focused self-referential parts of your brain. And I think that this finding fits very well with the types of experiences that the other panelists have expressed. So the fact that music can really deeply probe into old memories, or that that aesthetic experiences can tap into a very personal place and act as a way of expressing things that we don't necessarily have words for. And the fact that you can kind of reach someone who even maybe isn't really able to express more recent memories. We know, for example, from other research that people who have Alzheimer's, they may not be able to tell you that they've met you before if they're in a very advanced state. But they oftentimes have very stable aesthetic preferences. So there's something about the aesthetic mechanisms that are very separate from, even though they rely on a lot of the same basic cognitive mechanisms, there's still something that is preserved, even if a person has forgotten who a loved one is, that they might still express some similar preferences, and it just shows, I think, how important and deep some of the aesthetic experiences are. And then the last thing that I found interesting is this idea that you can use musical elements to work on personal development or needs. And in particular, one area that I'm interested in understanding is to what degree the ruminative behaviors that happen when a person is in a severe state of depression might be, whether or not we might be able to kind of reach through that block with aesthetic experiences. So we know, for example, that some of the ruminative behaviors, and we were just talking about this at dinner last night, some of the ruminative behaviors that people have when they are depressed involve this default mode network being overly active and locking the brain into a particular pattern of activity that a person can't really escape from. So if you've been down, or if you've actually suffered from severe depression, you know that you oftentimes can get into a loop where all you see is this narrow view of what's wrong with your life, and it's really hard to escape that. And there isn't really good research on this out there yet, but I think that it's possible that aesthetic experiences with art or with music could potentially be a way to break through that block and help the brain kind of snap into, or at least get a window into, a different organizational principle that could be the start of a therapeutic process or something. So that's just kind of an idea that there's not much evidence for, but that I think is something I'd love to look at in the future.
Very interesting. Any other thoughts on the panel off of those ideas, or other observations that people want to bring up before we might go to general questions? I have another question that just came to me based on what you were just saying, but other thoughts?
Maybe two quick stories regarding that. I think in talking a lot of it about Alzheimer's and depression there, but also those down states, those down times, like when we're not old, like when we're in teenagers. Dan talked a lot about the key ages being from 8 to 14. And if you are interested in music education, then you may be, we may be dealing with children from, say, 5 to 18. Quick story about a gentleman who I knew well when I was growing up, and he said that he was from a home that was dysfunctional, and Dad was in the process of leaving, and there was a lot of strife, and he was taking piano lessons, and his teacher was very, very, very astute about him as a person, and gave him, he couldn't play Bach. He said, "I don't like Bach. I can't play Bach. I don't like it." So somehow this lady gave him Debussy. And he was talking about it, and he would come home from school quietly depressed, as he confessed, and he would run to the piano. And he would get out the Little Shepherd or Gollywog's Cakewalk or something like that from the children's corner suite and just really play for 30, 40 minutes. And his mother said, "I am just so impressed how you come immediately to the piano and play for like 20 or 30 minutes. I'm so impressed that you want to practice." And 40 years later, as a grown man, they were reminiscing about that incident. And the son said to his mother, "I didn't have the courage to tell you that back then I wasn't practicing. I was crying." That the music allowed him to express this deep, deep emptiness. And yet, as Dan said, he was playing, but he was not only playing by himself, he was playing with the master, say Debussy, he wrote it, but also with a feeling. And to me, that relates in a very clear fashion, having worked with you guys yesterday and knowing the great work that your ensemble teaches. What happens when students who are in band, orchestra, and choir at any level feel like band, orchestra, and choir is the best period of the day? And that's where my family is. That's where I can be me. Then the music, the actual notes, take on something very special. But it also is that condition where you're interacting with others as you talk in that aesthetic experience, but also you feel safe to be you. And you guys are doing it, and you're doing it in your theory as well. It's terrific.
Nathan, I didn't know if you had something to add.
Yeah, I actually wanted to comment on your question. I think it's a fantastic question, the idea of modulating this default mode network and using aesthetics to see if we can kind of work with individuals who have depression to get them out of this internal self-deprecating thought loop process. I think your research is actually going to hopefully greatly inform a specific approach of music therapy known as the method of guided imagery in music developed by music therapy pioneer Helen Bonney. And the idea is using the preset images, that are thought to be aesthetic, or that might have, sometimes depending on the level of the session or how far into the therapy it's going, is maybe images that are specific to the individual as well, to help evoke emotions, and then slowly fading the given images and then letting the music to help spur on internal imagery that can work through therapeutic processes. But I think this work with neuroaesthetics and trying to figure out the neural mechanisms behind that hopefully will greatly inform this type of therapy in the future.
Very cool. Additional comments? I have a thought here, and then we'll open it up to general questions from the audience. But there's a neurologist who has a really interesting book called Why God Won't Go Away. And in that, they look at basically this deactivation of the parietal lobes leading to this connectedness to all things and this kind of mystical experience. And as you're aware, you also have these kind of temporal lobe epilepsy sometimes are associated with these moments of awe and wonder. And I'm wondering what you're thinking, and this is to Ed first, and then if anyone else wants to chime in. But based on your research on the default mode network and this other kind of research, how do you think those are going to pan out, or where do you see that?
That's an interesting question. So I think that, you know, the deeper question is there are a variety of transcendent states that humans can experience, right? We can experience a transcendent state that might be described as a religious experience, or we can experience a transcendent state that is an aesthetic experience, or you know, a state of kind of like a wow, I never thought about that before. And you know, so whether or not, most likely it makes sense that these states share something in common, right? I think that we don't really yet have a sense for what they share in common. As you pointed out, some of the brain regions that have been implicated in some of these experiences of religious connectedness don't seem to be exactly the same regions, although I think that I would have to look back at there may be some overlap, because there are nodes of the DMN in the temporal lobe and parietal lobe. So it's possible. I think that more so than specific regions, though, the real key and where we're likely to see more overlap moving forward is that all of these really represent a change in network dynamics. So within the field of cognitive neuroscience, we're at a point where many people have done many studies on what particular little regions of the brain do. And now we're really in a stage of trying to synthesize that to understand the brain from the perspective of networks. And as I've told you, I think that an aesthetic experience is one where the typical network dynamics changes and the brain really enters into a different mode of interaction between these networks. And it's possible that these other kind of transcendent experiences might share that in common, that they also trigger kind of a non-standard dynamics in how these networks interact with each other.
Very interesting. Any additional thoughts on that? All right, we don't have microphones for the audience, but do we have any questions that we might be able to ask for the panel? Anyone have a question? Sure.
I'd like to know if, Nathan, did you mention that addiction was something you were working on, or did I?
Yes, so the topic of my thesis currently is to compare traditional talk support therapy with music therapy to work on addiction treatment. My rationale behind this currently is the notion that listening to music that one enjoys helps with the release of dopamine, and so that activates that reward center. And I'm thinking, if we can activate the reward center in a positive environment, a sober environment for them, to which they can also have that sort of tie from that sober experience into maybe their home environment or the environment that they usually are in, and they can have that sort of connection, cognitively speaking. I also think, in many situations where addiction happens, it can cause individuals to be cut off from their community, to cut off from their friends and family, and they don't really have a support group that they can go to. And then, after a while, and if they come out of rehab, well, where are they going to go? Or who are they going to talk to? And so this idea of using music, both improvisation and composition, of helping them with learning music, may also be a way of giving them a type of social capital with which to work, and so they can reintegrate into social communities better. So.
And if you're talking about faces and pleasurable things, what do you think about the ads on TV where you see the beautiful faces, you see the happiness, and you see the opposite?
Was that question's for me? Okay, so it's interesting that you bring that up, and I think that actually, in part of my talk, I talked about the importance of meaning for aesthetic experiences, for what people find pleasurable. And actually, I think that work is bad news for advertisers, because I think that what it tells us is that the passive pairing of a beautiful face or a car or whatever with a product that they want to sell you is actually not enough, because it's not a deep relationship. That in order for a person to really develop a deeper interest and liking of a particular product, it's because you've got a good product and they learn something more about the product, right? And I personally am not as interested in using the work I'm doing to help marketers, but I think that you know, at the end of the day, some of the research that we've done really shows how just this passive pairing is not a very deep. It doesn't really give you a deeper understanding of what you're looking at, and I think that because of that, it really shows some of the failings of that approach.
But you don't think that would cause a person who's an alcoholic and who can't stop drinking to drink?
Well, we know a fair amount about. I apologize, I didn't hear that part of your question before. We know that there are lots of environmental cues that can lead a person to start drinking again, or engage in other addictive behaviors. Whether or not the particular pairing of a image of a bottle of alcohol with something that may be an object of desire, like a beautiful face, whether or not that compounds the issue versus just seeing the bottle by itself, I don't think there's actually good research out there, and I personally would predict that just being reminded of alcohol itself is probably doing the lion's share of the work, not its association with other things.
Cool. Other questions? Okay, yeah, Tiffany.
I was wondering if you have any advice for the average non-musician on how to use music to improve either academic or athletic performance.
Academic or athletic performance. Well, I mean, if you're able to get earworms stuck in your head easily and have kind of like an internal, auditory track of songs going in your head, one thing you can do is try and study to specific types of music, and then if you're in the test, if you think of that song, maybe that might prime some things that you were looking at while you were looking at that. I know, well, and thinking about the rehabilitative exercises and using force and time cueing to help with that. You can do the same thing if you're exercising. It can help to, if listening to positive music or music that you enjoy personally, it can help to reduce pain. You can exercise for longer. The timing mechanism of movements can help to make you either move faster or help with that exercise. But
I would just add two small things. So I actually have a colleague at MPI who is interested in looking at the effects of music as a motivator in sports and things like this. And I think that it's clear that one of the roles that music plays is as a motivational tool, right? That it can really help you gear up and provide that kind of oomph that you need to keep going and to keep practicing, because it kind of taps into these deep processes that we have. I think that interestingly, I also think that a role of music can be in providing distraction. And what I mean by that, in a good way. So I personally often find that when I have something I really need to do, my mind is buzzing and I've got 20 different things I could be doing, and it's really easy for me to put off the hard stuff and tackle the little easy, simple things. And music, for me personally, is a way where we know that it can occupy your attention, but it doesn't necessarily occupy all of your attention. And so certain forms of music can actually kind of be background music in that they can help perhaps reduce some of the anxiety and reduce some of the need to just be busy, and actually help you then quiet some of that stuff and really focus on more specific difficult tasks.
Question right up here in the front.
I had a student a number of years ago. I was a violin teacher, and I was having trouble connecting with him in his lessons, and he was not really connecting with the piece. And so I finally kind of got desperate and pulled out my laptop and tried to just figure out, how can I turn this kid on? And so I played, 20 different songs, a variety of genres for him, and asked him to rate the songs that he was hearing on a 10-point scale. And usually I can eventually get to some kind of song that for some kid, he was ones and twos and threes for the entire set of music. There was not a single song that he was able to connect to and find emotionally. So I assume that he's one of that very small percentage of people that doesn't necessarily respond well to music. The only thing that he said that he connected to was the music that was played during his video games, which presumably has some of the effect of kind of context and semantic meaning. So my question is, given that small subset of the population that has that characteristic of not necessarily relating to music, first of all, what's going on with that? Do we know yet? And second of all, are there any lessons there for those of us who do connect to music in terms of the way that, when do we connect with music? And there's what I experience as a music teacher and someone who performs music. After I've come home from symphony, the thing that I want the most is silence. There's kind of like a need for rest and recovery. Does that have any tie-ins to not wanting music?
Sure. Okay. So the first question about individuals who seem to not really be express desire in music in general. Dan mentioned this last night, and I don't necessarily know that I have a better answer for you in terms of why some people are not necessarily moved by music. I think that I could see a couple of things. I mean, it could be that if this person was, not knowing this person, if this was a person who was not really engaged or moved by any aesthetic endeavors, then they might actually fit the definition of anhedonia, and you could actually consider it a clinical issue, right? That maybe this person is not actually getting pleasure from things in their life that they normally would or that other people would, and there could actually be, it could be a symptom of something bigger. But that may also not be the case. Maybe there are other things that this person is really engaged by. I mean, whether or not it's video games, which also really, I think, engage this information foraging desire, perhaps sometimes in a healthy way, maybe sometimes in a less healthy way. Maybe this person might be more interested in art, or might be more interested in movement stuff, or it's possible that I don't know that I have any good answer for that. And then the second question was, just remind me.
Do we know what's going on in terms of the people who don't appreciate music? Do we have a sense of what areas of the brain are compromised differently?
I don't really know that is very well understood. I really don't think that we have a good sense for that, unfortunately.
Nathan, you look like you're about to jump in, or maybe Dave was too, it looks like.
Oh, yeah, well, I was going to say, as far as I know, we don't have any understanding of neural mechanisms as why people might not enjoy music. I'm not sure of any research that exists for that. I would love to read it if it does. And I like what you were saying about the idea that, maybe if they don't enjoy other aesthetics, it might be the anhedonia issue, or maybe they do have other things that they enjoy. And you might also want to consider musical enjoyment may not be specific to genre, it may be more specific to context. If someone does like video games or movies more than that, maybe they enjoy movie scores, or maybe they enjoy video game music specific to that activity that they enjoy, and they just don't like it for the sake of itself.
I got an illustration, I think, of this. To preface it by saying, sometimes the possibility is your wide range of 8 songs may not have been wide enough. Because you never know. There is a sports announcer on ESPN radio in Dallas. His name is Steve Dennis. And he has an afternoon show. Okay, so occasionally I listen. And I don't know have any of you ever listened to sports talk radio? Okay? They don't usually talk about art. It's cowboys, or it's all sports and guy things, if you will. But I was shocked one day where Steve's got to be maybe in his 50s, maybe early 60s, and then he was Frito, this other guy. he's got to be maybe 20s or 30s. So they're bantering back and forth, and somewhere out of the blue, the young guy made a disparaging remark out of the blue about Adele. And Steve Dennis went off. He went off. And he said, "Don't you talk to me about Adele." He said, "When I hear When We Were Young, every time I hear When We Were Young, I cry immediately." This is a jock radio guy in his 50s or 60s talking about this song by Adele, who to me is one of the great songwriters as well as artists there is. But what was it? Okay, it was a wide variety, but when you know, something about that song took him back, I'm sure. He just said enough brief things in that rant that took him back to his high school reunion. You look like a movie. You feel like a song. You know, When We Were Young. It's like, whoa. So that there's these. But you never know. And that our experience, what really is aesthetic for us, it could be amazingly wide. And then maybe we just did. I would have never thought Steve Dennis. He's a hard-nosed dude. But some hit him.
Actually, I had two quick follow-ups. First was, one thing you could try is to ask this person to pull up what they like and then have maybe them explain to you why they like have them bring in something or pull up something on the web rather than you trying to guide, like have them bring it in and then ask them, what is it about it that you like? And that might give you more of a clue. If they really say, there is nothing that I like. And then I remembered your second question, which is why is it that you have this experience of actually getting tired and needing a break from music sometimes? And I think that I'll just quickly say that I think that there's different modes that we can interact with aesthetic material in. So I think one mode is one where we are really information foraging, we are really actively engaged, we're working hard at it, we have to maintain focus. And you, in your job, I'm sure, are engaging with music in that way. And at some point, it's tiring. It's like doing any other task that you really have to keep your mind to. It's really engaging, and it requires a lot of mental resources. And at some point, you need a break from that. Other people, they listen to music, and I'm sure you do sometimes as well, primarily as something in the background. And for them, music can serve that relaxation, restoration function. And so it may be that since it's your job, it's very difficult for you to kind of like get enjoyment in a passive way, and so I think that it's important to realize that we engage with many different types of aesthetic material in different modes.
All right, we're not quite done yet. We're going to, we have a tradition of kind of introducing next year's Krost Symposium topic. If Kyle Olson is around, I might have him come on up. So Kyle, if you come, but first, let's thank the panel.
I shouldn't be on a stage with these people at all. And you're going to regret this because it's going to turn into the Kyle show really quickly. I do want to thank everybody for making this a great Krost. I think what makes it a really great Krost is a topic that allows for and in thinking about this, like how do I introduce the topic for next year to you? What is the way that I can frame this? What is the example that I can give you? I kept coming back to this. I'm hoping I'm not the only one who knows this. The example, I thought it was Luke Cage. One of you? Anybody? Heck yeah. Yeah, right on. Luke Cage. So, Luke Cage is a comic book character, right? He's impervious to bullets, super strong, but there's these other problems with him as well. So he doesn't have a history the way that other comic book characters do. There's Batman. Like Batman has like this. Most of you guys are of an age that there's only 2 Batman for you. But 11 Batman. You guys don't know that whole history. Luke Cage doesn't have that problem. But Luke Cage does have like this great pseudo-scientific origin, right? Like it's this way that I don't think I would engage the scientists, my colleagues, with the hard science of putting him in like this crazy chamber, jacking up the temperature and getting rid of him that way, giving him this amazing powers. But what is really interesting about Luke Cage or any of the origin stories for me as comic book characters is that, like, as a kid, or you get really imaginative, right? Like, you just engage with it. And then you can engage with others who are also really engaged with the characters that you're engaged with, right? Whether you're a scientist or an artist or whatever, like, you get involved with those characters and you engage in this really imaginative behavior, whether it's around science or anything else. And so that's what we're going to be looking at next year, is the arts in the sciences through comic books, right? We're going to be looking at comic books next year. With Krost, pretty excited about it. It's like the 14-year-old me is really on stage right now with fanboying out. We will look at comic books beyond just the DC and Marvel universes, looking at that in a way that's very expanded. Right? It's not just comic books in a traditional sense. Comic books get really big. Images and ideas put together to really spark your imagination beyond just a little kid going forward into adulthood and into research.
For more information, please visit tlu.edu.